morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday webinar for PDSVISION. My name is Michael Wimberly, and I will be doing the webinar today. We will give everyone just a few more minutes to get online, and then we will get started. But once again, welcome to Wednesday webinar. All right, we will go ahead and get started. So once again, welcome to PDSVISION's Wednesday webinar. This topic is going to be PDM Back to Basics. For this one, of course, we're going to go through and review PDM and how it's changed over the years. We'll do just a kind of general introduction, of course, of me and PDSVISION. We'll talk about the PDM history and then the benefits of using a PDM system, and of course doing a live demo after that, followed up by Q&A. So for myself, I am Michael Wimberly. I'm a technical director of customer success here at PDSVISION. I have been here for a little bit over 11 years now. I've been working with PTC products over 20 years. Been working in the PTC channel over 20 years. And then of course, PTC certified trainer and implementer of both Creo and Windchill. PDSVISION, just at a glance, we're headquartered in Stockholm, and we're in operation in actually 14 countries now. Trusted advisor for software solutions and services in the digital transformation with over 2,500 years of combined technical experience within our domain. We are one of PTC's top partners. As well as we have our own set of applications that we also have developed under the My PDS apps. One of those that you guys may have seen or have heard of is the My PDS Search, which is basically an overlay on top of Windchill with searching capabilities as well as collecting data. We've done a webinar on that one as well. All right, now moving forward, with a lot of companies that are transitioning into this digital world where we're now going in and taking advantage of all the new technology that's coming out, whether we're talking in our products, in production, in process, in our infrastructure, and just the overall data itself. So some of the challenges in products is we want to go through and make sure our products are smarter. We want to make sure we can connect them with the Internet of Things. We want to make sure we fulfill all the regulations. So as we go through and make things more technology-based, we still want to make sure that we cover all the regulations that are required for our particular products. And of course, then go in and build up a digital twin. With the digital twin is basically a digital version of your physical product. So we're not just talking the basics of the outline of everything. We're literally going in and making sure that we do the routed systems where we're doing the electrical pieces of it, any piping, wiring, all those things that may be inside of there. We want to go through and duplicate that inside of the digital twin and then be able to go through and run different analysis on that to make sure that it functions properly. So we can use that digital twin in multiple areas inside of our environment. We, of course, in production, want to always decrease manufacturing downtime. We want to be able to predict failures, aging workforce. With that happening, a lot of the knowledge that they have, they're taking with them, but we want to grab as much of that as we can and incorporate that into some of the process that we're doing in our digital environment. And then, of course, optimize the production through artificial intelligence where we can. Remove data silos. Data silos has been a big issue for processes because everybody holds on to their own data. And what's the latest in each of these different silos? So instead of having an individual silo, we're having one pool of data that everybody's pulling information from. That's kind of where Windchill comes in, because we pull in all different areas of your company into Windchill, and everybody's looking at the latest and greatest versions of what they need to see. Smart connected systems. We also want to talk about smart connected operations, and then of course service and operations as well. We go through and create our environments. We want to reduce non-value IT costs. One way that people are doing that is going to cloud and SaaS systems. So instead of having physical hardware, people are using the cloud to do things, as well as using software as a service, the SaaS, Instead of having the software loaded locally, the software is actually a service that they're connecting to. And then we also have big data, where of course is all of our information, create value out of the data that we have through artificial intelligence, our data lakes, and of course the analysis. And then of course make sure that everything is managed properly from our data with the cybersecurity, making sure that of course only the right people have the right access to the information, whether we're talking directly inside of Windchill or even within our networks. And then of course create new business models. Well, with all the new technologies coming on, we can't have the same business models, so we can go through and improve our business models as we go through and improve the way we do things. All right, then I always go through companies are going through and building up their digital thread environments. So I'll continue to go back to this slide just to let you know what we're covering, what area that actually focuses on. So because we're going into the PDM piece of it, then it's basically covering the gray section, our CAD information and how to manage that CAD, document management, requires management, technical publications, simulation, all that stuff can be managed and stored inside of our PDM system. All right, so just quickly, what is a PDM system? Product data management should be not a new concept. All the way back in the day when we were actually using the drawing boards to go through and actually design our products, we still had data management. It just wasn't electronic, they were file cabinets. So we would go through and actually store those drawings in the different file cabinets. Then as things progressed and we continued to go into the technology age and we started using computers, that was great. But for most of the computers, they didn't have a large hard drive. So from that standpoint, we then started using floppy disks. I know some of you guys are having nervous twitches at this point looking at some of this stuff. I understand. But then we moved on, and now technology gave us faster computers, larger hard drives, as well as networking, which now we were able to go through and store things either locally on our computer or on a network drive where we can go through and share the files throughout our company. Now, when that all transition happened, there were some problems. One of them is when it became digital, it was easy to have duplicate objects. So I could go through and now copy that object from our shared drive to my computer. My coworker could do the same thing. 2 or 3 other coworkers could do the same thing. That could be a problem because now if we all are making changes to it, what changes are then valid? Which is the next one. We don't know where or which is the latest version of that particular file. It's out there, but all 3 of us made changes to it. Which now comes to the third one. We all put them back onto that shared drive. Guess what? It's not the first one in that wins, it's the last one in that wins. So the last person that goes through and actually adds their file to that shared drive wins. Their changes are the ones that people are going to see when they go through and retrieve that file out. Even with your best standard operation procedure, it's still going to happen no matter what. It may not happen as often, but it's going to happen just because it's too easy to happen. The solution to that is a PDM system. PTC's definition of a PDM system. Product data management is the use of software to help organizations connect and communicate product information across globally distributed teams where multiple product development tools may be used. PDM enables controlled global collaboration across concurrent design environments, from requirements to system models to design, mechanical, electrical, and software, simulation, validation, even verification. It guarantees that every model, drawing, and document is secured and easily found in a central repository. Part and document searches leverage the entire history of the associated relationship of each piece of content. So basically, the PDM system is the thing that manages and controls the access, the versioning, everything associated with your actual data. Once again, now we have that central repository of data, but we're controlling how people can access that data. One way we're doing it by using some of the tools inside of there. One of them is by states. We have life cycle states that we can go through and take things through. States can be used to show where the data is in its life cycle and to control permissions to it. By using promotions, you can go through and get approvals before it actually changes that particular state. So if we're in the design state and we're now going into prototyping or released, we can go through, instead of having that thing just being set to that state without anybody looking at it, you can have an approval process there that will allow somebody to go through and sign off on it before it actually goes to that. So that's where your checker now comes in and validates the information. Also, revision control. When you have something that is in production, you don't want to change a production item. So it's in production and it's at revision A. There is a change that needs to happen. We don't want to change revision A because we don't know which one is the latest. So instead of going in and changing revision A, we're going to revise it and make revision B and then going to make the changes. But that also can go back to the states thing as well, is that when we set something to released, then nobody can change it. We limit the permissions. You can download it, you can view it, but you don't have permission to actually want to make modifications to it. So we can lock that out as well, which will then force you to go in and have to revise it to take it to B, so it sets it to a state that is modifiable. No duplicate file numbers. That's also one of the big things. When we are looking at the file systems, I can go through and create a part called block.part. So can my coworkers. So can everybody else in my engineering department go in and create a part called block.part. And now we want to put that on the shared drive. All of our block.parts are different. Who wins? But if we have this PDM system, when we go through and whoever checks in first a part called block.part, then that is the only one that is in there. If they have a new one, they'll need to either go through and be able to override it, or once again, your block and my block are two different ones, so they will go in and rename theirs to block with their initials or give it an actual part number. Who knows? Related and associative data remains connected even if a file is renamed or moved. That is the one big thing that people run into when you're dealing with just the file systems, is moving or renaming files. Because the only way for Creo to recognize that is for those files to be available in session when things are being renamed. Moving is a whole nother thing. That's when we get into search paths. It has to be in a folder that you have a search path associated with. But that becomes a headache as well. Can become a headache, I should say. But inside of a PDM system, once again, Windchill, doesn't matter where you put it. It doesn't matter how many times you rename it. It never loses its connection to that particular assembly, drawing, whatever it may be that it was associated with. Those relationships don't change. Change management. To be able to go through and control your changes. So you're still going through your ECN, ECR processes. All that stuff can be used inside of Windchill as well on your CAD data. So once again, going through that appropriate checking process to go through and make sure that the right people are looking at the changes before they're fully implemented. So, and of course, we can always do bill of materials. Even with our CAD files, we can still go in and export a BOM even if we're not using WT parts. And we'll get into that in one of the later webinars that we're going to do. But once again, we can still export a BOM into an Excel spreadsheet and use that in our ERP system if we want to, or just simply for whatever we need that BOM for, just a review or something. And then, of course, you can use the publishing tools to view lightweight representations. So when we're going in and viewing, those that need to go through and see the files, they don't need Creo to do it. That's the other thing with the file system. There's no way of anyone there's no way for someone that does not have CAD to view what the CAD file looks like. And that could be something as simple as just looking at a drawing and getting the dimension off of that. In order to do that, they need to go through and have Creo to go through and view that. But we can go in and create our published viewables inside of Windchill and they have that simple license that is just a view license, or use our PDF search to go through and do that, find the file, view it, look at the document, look at the dimension that they need, look at the BOM, whatever it is they need. They can even save a copy of it, whatever they need to do to it. But they don't need to have a full version of Creo to do so. They're looking at the lightweight version of that to go in and view it. And then, of course, the other benefit, of course, is a multi-CAD environment. Windchill is not just for Creo. It is for Creo, SolidWorks, CATIA, whatever. Windchill manages CAD data and other data, but we're focusing on CAD data right now. And the workgroup manager that is used for the connections to a SolidWorks or CATIA or Inventor, things like that, that allows Windchill to see their files as actual CAD data, and it manages them just as though they were actually Creo files. Because once again, Windchill looks at the category of CAD data, and those items fit into that same category, so they get the same treatment, as well as we can go through and set up publishers for those as well. So those viewables are available for those environments too. All right, so once again, the key focus that we're looking at is the combination of Windchill and Creo. So we're going to go in and start with the basics once again, and go in and look at managing files outside of Windchill, and then see the advantages of doing them inside of Windchill. So here's currently my Creo session, and as you can see, I am looking at a current folder that has assemblies, manufacturing files. It has a couple of drawings in here and a couple of information files. The main thing I want to look at for this one is I want to look at the assembly. There is an assembly in here called a foot bath. I want to go and open it up, and there it is. Pretty simple assembly. I can shade it, so we can go through it and view it. I can change it, of course, to any door hidden line. So you can see there are inner components to each of those, the outer shells, and then the other pieces associated with it. So pretty simple assembly. Once again, this is outside of Windchill. This is just pulling something out from my hard drive. I also have in here, in that same directory, I have other drawings that I can go through and open. There's a cover that we have that is also associated there that has a few dimensions on it as well. Now, with this, what we want to do is we have that cover part in there, and without thinking, we just want to go through and make a change to that. And the change is actually not in Creo. We actually want to go through and make a change to that through its name. So we have this cover, and once again, we want to go through and rename this because we're going to go in and create a copy of it and be able to use it elsewhere. All right, so now when I come back into my Creo session and I go in and open up that same object, it now goes in and lets me know, hey, there's a model that it cannot find. There's a disconnect. As soon as I go into my Windows Explorer, which is so easy to do, when I go into my Windows Explorer and I say, oh yeah, we need to change this. We need to give this a new part number. We can go through and do that through Windows Explorer, but as soon as I do that, because Creo has no idea that happened, it now is looking for the old name, which also means if I come in here and I open up the drawing will also fail because it does not see that model anymore. So what do we have to do? We say, oh shoot, I forgot. I need to go through and actually change it inside of Creo. So I'll come back in here and I'll change this file again, change it back to cover. And once I do that, then of course, the assembly will open back up, no failures. The drawing will open back up, no problem. Now I can go into the actual part itself, open it up, and now come in here and do my file, manage file, rename, And then I have the option of how I want to rename it. So I have the option of rename on disk and in session, which means it's going to rename it and the history of it. Or I can do a rename in session, and what that actually does, it creates a new file. So it does not change what's on the hard drive, it changes what's in session to this new file name, which once again will create a new model. So I'll go ahead and rename on disk and in session, say okay, and now that's there. That's cover one. When I go back into the assembly, there's cover one. Now what I also want to make sure I do is I want to make sure I save this looking at that new name. Because if I don't, then it's not going to remember that there was a new name associated with it. Now, if you also realize there's some other files in here as well. There's a cover for manufacturing. That's in there. So it actually has a reference that is actually now outdated that it cannot find. So we'll need to go through and update that. So this is the one thing about renaming items in session or in Creo versus having a data management. There's no way to really tell where this part is actually used. So if I come over and I rename it, maybe I forgot this cover is used in 3 other assemblies. And now I just renamed it, and those 3 other assemblies have no idea that the name changed. So what's going to happen is, once again, when they open up, they're going to go in and look for cover.prt, which is no longer there anymore. So now they're going to have failures. So this is where a lot of those issues come in. It's simply not being able to properly track and know what is associated with the files that we're working on. So instead of doing it that way, what we actually want to be able to do is take the advantage of a PDM system. So I have my session already connected to my Windchill. Great. As soon as I basically activate it, I can see here now I have my common space and my workspace associated with it. I can come in here to workspace. There's the files that are there. I'm going to come up here and create me a new workspace. And I'm going to call this workspace tub. Great. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and open up that same assembly that I was just looking at, but now I'm going to store it in my in my workspace. So it's initially, because I'm connected to Windchill, it's initially looking for files inside of my workspace. There aren't any there. I'm going to go to my working directory and once again open up this footbath. There it is. And now I'll go in and save this. Now when I save it, it is no longer saving back to my hard drive. It now saved those files inside of my workspace. And then what I'm going to do as well, I'm going to go ahead and open up in that working directory this drawing, save it. Now, what I can do, if you are bringing data in from your hard drive, there's several things that you can do. So, of course, you can just open and save. You can do an import. I don't recommend doing an import for like an assembly. I would recommend if you're going to do an import, you can do it for a part, because unless you have errors in your part, it's not a big deal. But you want to make sure with your assembly that you're opening your assembly and making sure it finds everything that it needs, and then saving it. Now, what I would also do is I would now go into my workspace and I would import my drawings, especially if I had a lot of them. I wouldn't want to go through and open and close every drawing that I have. I would rather go in and do an import of the drawing and the formats that are there. So there's a couple of drawings here. It's not that many. Actually, maybe only one. Working directory. Yep. So there's a couple of them here. Once again, save that. And then open up one more drawing. Check that. I don't worry about it. All right. So now I have these two drawings here in my workspace. Now, right now, they're there. They're just in my workspace. So let's say, for instance, I'm going to go ahead and close my model out of Creo, or close all the models out of Creo, so that nothing is in session. And then when I go back to my workspace, hey, I renamed this cover, but you know what? I should actually go back to the basic name of cover. It should not be cover 1. So with that, I can come over here and I can select rename. And now I am looking for the new file name, and I'm just going to take it back to cover.prt. So it's file name here, new file name there, great. And there it is. So now, how does that affect everything else? With no issues. If I go over here now and open up that foot bath, no problem. It still sees it. Because once I get it in Windchill, Windchill understands the relationships between the files, which is where it definitely is beneficial, because once I come in here, and let's just say I go into the information for this cover, there's an option in here for related objects. My related objects will show me that this cover is used inside of this foot bath. So it benefits us to have that PDM system, because if it's used in a foot bath and then the larger foot bath or foot bath A, foot bath B, I can go in and still have that same single part inside of Windchill that is used in multiple locations. So once again, I can go through and manipulate this without any problems. Once again, no matter where it's located, no matter what the name is, I can change it to just the number 1, and it will be perfectly fine. So that is the benefit, one of the benefits, I should say, of going in and using that data management or PDM system. So let's go ahead and go back into my workspace. And now at this point, I want to put all these files inside of Windchill. So right now, they're just in my workspace. They're not accessible by anybody else but me at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check these files into the database. So I'm going to select them. I'm going to come over here. Here's a check-in icon. And now I'm going to go through and check them in. Now, before I check them in, I want to make sure I put them where I want them to go. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to choose folder after I've selected them all, and I want them to go to my B2B folder. Great, they'll go there. This comment is going to be initial check-in. Finish. Uploading it. Oh, of course, probably something in there with the same name, which is great. All right, so we can see down here, when I go to check this in, there's actually an upload failure. I can come over here to this, which is a event management, select on this, and it's going to tell me what's wrong. Remember, I told you it can only have a single name inside of the database. So when I do this, it's telling me that the bracket.prt and the plug.prt are not unique. What that's telling me is there's already a part inside of Windchill that has these names in there. So what do I need to do? I need to go through and rename mine, because I'm pretty sure that bracket and that plug are not the same as mine. Not a problem. So I come in here, and like I said, it's simple. I don't have to pull up things in RAM. I don't have to do any of that. I'm going to take this plug part, and I'm going to go in and do my rename on it. And for the new file name, I'm going to call it plug. Sorry. Plug dash. You know how we do. We put our initials behind something. So I'm going to put my initials behind it. MW1.prt. And I actually should have selected the bracket as well, just to do them both at the same time. And I did not. But there's the first one, and here's the bracket. Same thing. I'm going to rename this bracket nw1.prt. Okay. So once again, we can go in and this one, make sure that when we're putting files into the database, that we actually have access or uniqueness in our name. So now I'll go through and do it again, do my check-in. Once again, specify that this is the initial check-in. I spelled that wrong, but we're good. Finish. It's going through. It's starting to upload. All right, it uploaded successfully. Now it's going and doing the check-in. And now the check-in is successful. Now I did have it create these WT parts. We'll deal with those another time. We're not going to worry about those. But what we see now in our workspace are all these files that we just checked in. Now, who has access to this? Well, a lot of that depends on the team. So every product that you have in the database has a team. So that determines who has permissions, as well as the states determine what type of permission that they have on those objects. So right now you can see all the people that are involved in here and the access that they have. So when I go in and I pull up another user, then inside of here, there are those files. But I have another user that has a little bit more restrictive access. So there's a guest role here. This person and Pat is actually from purchasing. And we only want Pat to see files that have been released. So I come over here and I look in that same directory and Pat sees nothing. It's all there. It's looking at everything. But when Pat looks at it, Pat does not see anything because Pat is only allowed to see objects that are in the released state. Nothing in that directory is at the release state at the moment, so Pat sees absolutely nothing. What happens though, and I'll just show you a quick example, what happens when I take this file and I change its state to released. And I'm just doing this one as an example, just so you can see how permissions will update. So now that I've gone through and I changed its state to now being a released file, when I now go back to Pat from purchasing and I refresh that same folder, hey, look what Pat can see. So we're not giving Pat access to everything in a folder. We're just giving Pat access to things when they need to see them. So everything is there. This is also one of the benefits of using Windchill is by simply going in and saying, hey, I only want these people to see these files during this time. They're part of the team. So if you go back through, there's a couple of things that are released in different areas that they can see, but this isn't all the files. If I come back over here and I go to that same data set and I look at the stadium seats, there's a lot more data in here than what Pat sees, because Pat will only see stuff at the release state. So this controls how people and what people can go in and access in your system, which is once again something that's very, very hard to do in a file system. With the file system, I've actually seen or heard that companies, they would actually, in order to go from an in-work to a release, those are actually different folders. So what they do is they move files from one folder to another folder that has different restrictions on that folder. Inside of here, we're not moving anything. We're just going in and changing the permissions on the files versus going in and actually moving things around. So we're taking it from an in-work to a release. And that changes all of its permissions. Because once again, something at the release state is now going to be more locked down than something that would be at a in-work or design state. So we're going in and controlling that. Now, here are some other benefits inside of here. Let's just say, I'm going to go ahead and rename this one or reset this one back. so that Pat doesn't have access to anything. They get a little happy when they see files. All right, so here's the other thing that we can do. Let's just say for this foot bath, we want to go through and actually, I'm going to a smaller assembly. For this red light, we have a red light, but we need to go through and create two other versions of it, a yellow light and a green light. So what we're going to do is we're going to take what's already here and we're going to go through and create copies of them. So I'm going to go over here and there's a save as. Pretty simple. Now, as soon as I select save as, it of course goes through and collects the necessary files. By default, what it goes through and does is it goes in and adds an underscore after each one of those to make it a unique name. So even if I did nothing else and I hit OK, it will go in and create these files, and these files will now be new file numbers because they're once again with an underscore. But for what we want to do, the light covers themselves, we're not going to change. We're just going to change the top level assembly. So I'm going to select on both of those, and I'm going to come up here and say we're going to reuse those. So we're not changing the name of these. We're just changing the name up here. So this is going to go from red, and I got rid of the underscore, to green, and the same thing over here. This is going to go from red to green. And get rid of this underscore. Great. Now, there is no way to go through and repeat that, so that will need to be done one more time. So same thing, take that same assembly, do a save as, and reuse these two components again. And then this one will now be yellow. And this one will be yellow. Great, no underscore. Get rid of the dot. All right, and there we go. So now we have multiple assemblies. So what can happen is if I come over here and I look at this light cover now, go to the information page for that, and if I go over to related objects, it's going to show me that that cover is now used in 3 different assemblies. Which means if I want to come through and I want to rename that file, I need to take into consideration, or if I need to change that file, I want to take into consideration those 3 other assemblies. Now it's also showing me that the green and the yellow are not used anywhere, but the red is. So if I expand red, I can see that that red is actually used inside of this foot bath assembly. So it shows me that whole hierarchy that this file will affect if I go through and make a change to it. Now, once again, everything is in this same directory. I can easily go through and move files around. So these 2 assemblies that I just created, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to move those. I'm just moving them up a level. Actually, you know what? No, I'm not going to move them up a level. I'm going to take that, the red assembly, the cover, and the socket, and I'm going to move those because those are more standard items. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these files and I'm going to move them actually to a library. So inside of Windchill, for those that aren't familiar, we have products and we have libraries. Products are your actual product data. Library, we look at as reusable items. So your hardware, your drawing formats, start files, all those things that you want, but you also want to be able to lock them down too. You don't want everybody going in and making changes to it. So I'm going to go in and move this over here into standard objects. So these assemblies and these parts are now going to be moved into that folder. Now, how does that affect my overall assembly? It doesn't. Because once again, it's metadata information. The file knows that it moved. So even when I come over now and I'm going to go into my workspace, I'm going to clear it out just because I want to use it new so we can recollect everything. So now when I come over here and I select on this foot bath and I say, hey, add this to my workspace, and I go to my advanced tab, it's going to go in and show, oh, there's a red light and there's the items for it. It knows where it is. So it doesn't matter if I move it to a different location. As long as I have access to that location, it doesn't care. It's pulling everything with it. Now, I am in my workspace. Let's say I want to go through and I want to create a new copy of a file because we've gone through and said, oh yeah, now we have this plug. Not the plug, the light socket. We now have this light socket and we need to make a change to it, but we only want it to affect this one assembly. So what I can do is I can come in here, create a copy of it, and then do a replace in it. So I can do multiple things here. So I'm going to actually start with the assembly, and I'm going to come over and do my save as. Now, if you look, it's going in and doing a save as on itself, and then it actually brings in the other parts as well. So if I want to change those as well, I can do that. And just for this, I'm going to go ahead and leave it at the underscore, just for simplicity. But there's one other thing that we can look at, is that I'm changing this assembly with an underscore, and actually, let's put an underscore 1 after all of them. And that's this here. So I'm going to go through an underscore 1 and an underscore 1. So what I selected was the renaming. I can go through and now basically use the set name and change them all at once. So if I'm changing like a string, if they were all red light, then I could change red to blue. And it will go through and change everywhere that red is to blue. I can change everything that says light to something else. But what I did was just simply add an underscore 1 after everything. So we can go in and do that. Now, I'm in my workspace, and this red light assembly is inside of that foot tub that I basically had gone through and added. So what happens, because that file is in my workspace, I have another tab. This other tab is called Update Parent. So when I go to Next, what it's asking me is, do I want to replace the red light assembly, the original one, do I want to replace it with the new one? Right now, it's just reusing the old one. If I want it to be replaced, then I would come over here, and the first thing I would have to do, because I'm going to change this foot assembly, is going to make me go in and check it out. So now that it's checked out to me, I can now come over and say, yes, I want to go through and replace that assembly. So now it's going to use the underscore 1 instead of the original. When I go in and select finish, the copy is created, the assembly is now changed. So when I look at its bill of material, basically the structure, I can now go in and see that that assembly is now using the underscore 1. And that is this version that is currently in my workspace. I have not checked in this change yet, which means if I go to the database, so right now this is workspace, if I go back into the database and look at it, I'm looking at the original one, you can see that it's still using the original light because I haven't checked in my change yet. So that's one of the benefits that we also want to look at when we're going in and changing files or looking at files, is the history that's there. And when I look at this, I can see that this file is checked out. I know who's working on it. First off, I know who's working on it because it's me. If I go in as someone else, oh, I know where it is. It's in here. When I go in as someone else into that same folder, and I see, oh, there's a foot bath assembly. Oh, it's working on. I can see exactly who's working on it. I'm in here as Bill. And what I'm able to do is go in and view the files. So who has it? Bill, Michael has it. I'm logged in as Bill. He can see that I have it. And if he needs to do something to it, he can reach out to me. But at the moment, I have control of this assembly. So he can always see that information. Now, for me, I'll go back to my workspace, and I can see there are the new files, and there is the change assembly. I'm going to go through and select those, and I'm going to go ahead and check all that information in. Awesome. Let's change the directory so they're going to the right location. And there we go. So with that, once again, we have control of the renaming. We have control of the copying. All these things are very, very simple, but it's the things that the PDM system allows us to do that working on our hard drive doesn't. Another thing that it allows us to stop from happening is if I come over here and I look at, let's look at this. There's a seat assembly that I want to look at. This one right here. If I go in and look at this seat assembly, I can go to its history. Now with this, there's 3 versions of this. There's a A.3, an A.2, and an A.1. When I look at history and I go to the structure and I look at the visualization of this, I can see, oh, there it is. That's what A.3 looks like. If I go to my history tab again and I go back and look at the info for A.2, so this is one of the benefits of that history, it immediately gives me this little red flag up here that says, hey, go to the latest, because it's letting me know I'm not looking at the latest. But for what I'm doing, this is going to work. So I'm going to go to my structure, and it shows me that the version A2, here are the files. So you can see there's A1, but then there's a B2 and B2 down here. If I go to history again and look at the very first one and go to structure, I can see that in A1, everything is A1. Now, let's just say we were doing a new design and we wanted to base that new design off of this old version of this assembly. We could do that. That is, once again, one of the benefits of Windchill, as I can now take this and I'm going to go in and simply do add to workspace. Now, I'm not modifying this because you're not able to modify an old version. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this to my workspace and then do a save as in my workspace. Now, could I do that here inside of the database? I sure can. I can do a save as on there. But the reason I always say do it in your workspace is that way you can validate that everything that you needed to do, you've done. If for some reason you missed a file that you needed to rename, once you do that copy, and if you don't have rename permission inside of the database, then you can't do anything with it. You have to wait for an administrator or somebody with the authority to go in and make that rename change for you. But if you do it in your workspace, because the files are still new, after you do that save as, you still have full control over them. So if you didn't do it properly, you can do a rename, or I can delete all my new copies, do a save as again. That way I capture everything, capture all the drawings. That's the other thing that we want to make sure of that we collect, and I don't think this has any, so it's kind of hard to confirm that, but we can see no drawings. But we can go through and validate that what we have, everything is properly done. Now, if you look at this advanced tab, you see these 4 yellow triangles. These triangles are simply letting me know that what I'm copying is not the latest version. I'm sorry, what I'm adding to my workspace is not the latest version. So it's letting me know I'm downloading an older version of this assembly. So it gives me that warning just by looking at it that something's not right. But if this is what I want, there's no problem there. If it's not what I want, then I want to go through and make sure that I go in and store or retrieve the latest version. So right now it's doing as stored. I can come over here and make sure it's doing latest, and then have it go through and update everything there. So, yep. And that's just because I didn't update the assembly. That was the initial item that I selected. So, but yeah, I can go through and do all of that as well. The other thing that is beneficial when I go into here is, let's just say, oh yeah, you know what? I don't need this rod part anymore. I'm going to go through and do a new one. So I have another one on my hard drive that I want to go through and use. I'm going to go ahead and delete this one out so that I can't use it anymore. So that number and name becomes available. So I'll go in and say delete. Great. Say OK. And it's going to give me an error. Why is it going to give me an error? Because it's going to step through the dependency that this thing has. So the first thing it's going to tell me it's not allowed because this part is associated with a change task. So that way it's telling me, hey, you can't delete this because this is associated to some document inside of Windchill. So it went through the change process in Windchill and it's associated with that. If I try to delete this, then it's going to break the relationship that it has to that change task. And we don't want that to happen. So it's stopping me. The only way to be able to do this is to get rid of that change that is documented inside of the database. But as we do that, what we're also going to find is that there's other things. So it's not giving you all the errors at once. It's this, it's this, it's this. It's going to say, hey, here's the first thing that's an issue. Okay, let's go and delete it. Okay, then what we're going to find, and it's very simple. We can see this one immediately. As we can come over here, do an information on this, and just do related objects. Oh, this is used in this assembly. So it won't let me delete this because this SS rod is used in this seat assembly. So it's going to tell me, hey, in order to delete this, you got to delete this. And then in order to delete this, you got to delete that. And what you can also see is there is a changes tab, and that goes in and shows me that this is a change task that this part is associated with. So it also controls you being able to remove information that is useful to the system. So there's a lot of things that allows you, that it basically stops you from doing. And the very easy one is when you go through and you open up a part that you don't actually have change options on at the moment. If I come over here and double click to go in and change that, it's going to force me to do something. I just can't willy-nilly just go in and start changing stuff. It says, hey, you don't have this part checked out. Do you want to check it out? I can go in and say, yes, check it out. That means I have control of it. Anybody else that wants to look at it or manipulate it will see that I have control of this part. Or if I don't want to make changes to it, I can go in and make it a read-only so that I don't accidentally change it, and it's basically locking it out for myself. I can do a continue, which allows me to go in and play with it, but not check it back in. Or, hey, this is a released file. I need to go through and create a new revision of it. So I can say revise and checkout. So now it goes from A to B. And now I'm able to go in and manipulate the B version of it versus the A version of it. All right. And then the last thing I want to show you guys, I realize I'm at the bottom of the hour, is I'm going to go back into here. And remember I told you that we had purchasing that's not able to go in and see anything at the moment. So if I go into the actual directory, she currently can't see anything. But if I come in here to this workspace, I'm going to come over here. Now, normally we'll do a promotion, but just for quickness, I'm going to select everything. I'm going to turn everything to the release state. So now we promoted it. It's been approved. And we're now ready for purchasing to go in and start doing something with it. I just promoted it. When I go through and I refresh it, there's all the files. But until I do that, purchasing has no access to any of those files. Although they exist, purchasing still cannot touch those. So keep in mind, once again, some of the main tools inside of the benefits of using Windchill, a PDM environment, is no duplicate names, always tracking relationships between the files, easy rename, easy save as functions. I can copy an entire drawing package. I can collect all the drawings and all the associated files with it and give them all new names and start from there instead of starting from zero. Here's a design that we already have. Let's copy it. and all of the associated files. Doesn't have to be in RAM, doesn't have to be anywhere, just store it in Windchill, save as, create a new copy of it. Permissions, states, all those things control who has access to the files. And once again, it's restricted by who's on the team. So for example, purchasing is only on this one team. So when purchasing goes and looks at all of its products, that's the only one that it sees, when in reality, there are a whole bunch of them that they just don't have access to because they're not part of the team. So with that, once again, any questions on any of those or anything? Like I said, I know we're at the bottom of the hour now. So, but once again, we want to make sure that you understand the PDM environment is an important tool in your design environment. Permissions, states, copying, data security, all that information is very, very, very key to making sure that things don't get overridden and that things don't fall apart. So, and there is a part 2 to this, technically, because we're going to do one that also talks about going from PDM to PLM. So PDM is just focused on CAD data management, product data. PLM is product lifecycle. So now we're looking at not just the CAD, but all of the other elements associated with the CAD, drawings, as well as change processes, workflows, approvals, BOM structures, EBOMs, MBOMs, all that stuff is associated as well. So there's a question that says, is there a way to mass move assembly without moving all of the components? Yeah, when you do a move, you can collect all the components. I mean, I'm assuming that's what you're referring to, is there a way to mass move? I mean, the components have to go with it if you're doing a mass move. If you just want to move the top level item, you can do that. But if you're trying to move the entire assembly or all the assemblies, just pick the assemblies, because you can filter that as well when you're looking in your environment. I can come up here, I can come in here and just do a filter that shows .asm and filter that down, select all those things and do a move on that. And then in the move, I can tell it to collect all the associated components. So I'm hoping that's what you were referring to. Not sure. Another one, how could you change a user's permissions inside of the role? With that, it's not done. Well, a quick way to do it is to give them a different role. That's the easiest thing I can tell you to do, is that if you want to change someone's permission, like right now, Pat is a guest. But if we want Pat to have a little bit more permission, I can add Pat as a member. And then they will get the basic functionality that all the members get. So that's one of the easiest things to do without changing the permissions on the guest role itself. So, but if you want to modify a role, then modifying the role will take an administrative permissions. It's not something that you do here. We would actually go in and need to do that in the policy administration to go through and specify what a guest can do, or what a member can do, or what a designer or whatever role we would go through and use for that. So yeah, we can go through and do that, but that wouldn't be a user level thing. That would be something that your administrator would go in and do, to go in and change those permissions. All right. If there aren't any more questions, you guys are welcome for answering your questions. Thank you guys for asking them. But if there's nothing else, once again, this webinar will be sent to you once it is available. And once again, look out for another part of this that will be next month that does deal with PDM to PLM. So we'll talk about that transition as well. Otherwise, you guys have a great remainder of your day, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thank you.